I used to think the weirdest thing about high school was how quickly people changed. One semester someone was your best friend, and by the next they acted like they barely knew you, but I was completely wrong. The weirdest thing that ever happened at my school started on a rainy Monday morning when our principal announced we were all going to learn a language that did not exist anywhere on earth. At first, everyone thought it was some kind of joke. We were halfway through first period when the loudspeaker crackled on and the principal told every student to report to new classroom assignments for a mandatory course called Chapelish Studies. Nobody had heard that word before. Kids started laughing, teachers looked confused, and even the vice principal standing near the office looked like he had no idea what was happening. I remember turning to my best friend Mason and asking him what Chapelish even meant. He shrugged and said it sounded fake. Honestly, it did. It sounded like someone mashed random syllables together 5 minutes before the announcement. Still, we followed the schedule changes because that is what students do. We lined up outside classrooms we had never entered before while unfamiliar teachers waited for us inside. The woman teaching my class looked young, maybe early 30s, with dark hair pulled tightly into a bun and this calm expression that never changed no matter what anyone asked her. She did not introduce herself normally. She walked to the board and started drawing symbols that looked nothing like any language I had ever seen. Some characters curved into spirals while others looked sharp enough to cut your eyes. Then she turned around and smiled at us like everything was perfectly normal. She said Chapelish would become the most important language of our generation and that we were lucky to be among the first students selected to learn it. Selected. That word stuck with me immediately. Nobody had volunteered for this class. Nobody had signed permission slips. Yet suddenly we were chosen for something none of us understood. I raised my hand and asked what country spoke Chapelish. She looked directly at me for a second too long before saying the origin was not important right now. Then she told us to memorize all 37 characters of the alphabet before tomorrow morning. That night I sat at my desk searching every corner of the internet for information. I tried different spellings. I searched academic databases. I checked language archives and old anthropology websites. Nothing came up. Not one result. It was like the word Chapelish had never existed before that morning. Even fake languages usually leave traces online from books or games or movies, but this one was completely invisible. I emailed to linguistics departments at nearby universities asking if they had ever heard of it. Then I searched the teacher herself and found no faculty page, no professional background, nothing except a basic school profile created 3 days earlier. The next day almost everyone already knew half the alphabet. That was the first thing that truly scared me. Learning languages is supposed to take time. I had struggled through 2 years of Spanish and still mixed up verbs constantly, but Chapelish felt different. The symbols settled into your brain unnaturally fast, like they had been waiting there already. By the end of the week kids were speaking basic sentences in class without hesitation. The grammar was strangely intuitive even though none of it resembled English structure. You did not translate thoughts into Chapelish. The thoughts arrived already shaped that way. I kept telling Mason the whole thing felt wrong, but he just laughed and said maybe I was upset because I was finally taking a class harder than algebra. He adapted immediately. Most people did. Within 2 weeks, students were casually greeting each other in Chapelish between periods. Teachers from unrelated subjects started using simple phrases during attendance. Posters appeared in the cafeteria with vocabulary words and pronunciation guides. It spread through the building so quickly it stopped feeling like a class and started feeling like an infection. The strangest part was how happy everyone seemed about it. Usually students complained nonstop when schools had new requirements, but nobody resisted Chapelish except me. Kids practiced voluntarily at lunch. Group chats switched between English and Chapelish mid-conversation. Even my parents acted like I was being dramatic whenever I brought it up at dinner. My dad told me every generation learns new skills and maybe this was just the future. My mom listened more carefully, but even she seemed more confused by my fear than concerned about the program itself. I started documenting everything because I could feel something slipping away around me. I recorded lessons on my phone and took pictures of every worksheet. The alphabet contained patterns unlike any known language family. There were no recognizable roots, no historical overlap with Latin or Germanic systems, no connection to Asian structures. It was completely isolated, like someone had invented an entirely original way for the human brain to organize thought. Then I found the forum post that changed everything. Late one night, I discovered a discussion thread buried on a student message board. Teenagers from 17 schools across different states were talking about Chapelish. Every detail matched perfectly. Same start date, same alphabet, same strange teachers refusing to explain where the language came from. I spent hours reading their posts while my stomach twisted tighter with every comment. One student said their school replaced morning announcements with Chapelish phrases. Another said advanced students had begun dreaming in the language. Before I could save the thread, the page refreshed and everything disappeared. Deleted. The next day I stayed after class and confronted the teacher directly. I asked why 17 schools were teaching the exact same non-existent language at the same time. She did not look surprised that I knew. In fact, she almost looked relieved. She simply told me our schools had been selected. When I asked selected by who, she gave the same cold answer she always used. That is not important right now. I snapped at her harder than I intended. I told her languages do not just appear from nowhere. Real languages have histories and cultures and people behind them. She calmly erased the board while I talked, then said something that still haunts me years later. Some things are meant to be learned, not understood. By the second month, Chapelish had completely transformed the social structure of the school. Fluency became status. Students who mastered it fastest were treated like they had unlocked some higher level of intelligence. My friends drifted away from me because conversations naturally shifted into Chapelish faster than I could follow. Mason stopped replying to texts unless I wrote partially in the language. Steady groups became impossible because everyone communicated through phrases I barely understood. And the worst part was that despite resisting it, I was learning to. Sometimes I would catch myself thinking in Chapelish without meaning to. The language slid into my thoughts like water leaking through cracks. Certain concepts genuinely felt easier to express through its grammar structures. It simplified emotions into strange, compressed forms that English could not replicate. Every time it happened, I felt sick, like something inside my head was rearranging itself without permission. Then the advanced symbols appeared. One morning, the teacher entered carrying new textbooks wrapped in dark blue covers. The symbols inside looked older and more aggressive than the standard alphabet. Some characters seemed to move slightly when you stared at them too long. Several students gasped with excitement the moment they opened the books, but I felt immediate nausea. The teacher explained this was advanced Chapelish reserved for students ready to progress further. I asked the obvious question, progress toward what? She looked directly at me again with that same calm expression and said toward understanding why we were really learning the language. Then she added something even worse. She said I could not understand because I was still resisting. That class terrified me more than anything before it. Everyone else followed along effortlessly while I could barely focus on the pages. The symbols blurred and shifted like optical illusions. Students around me took notes rapidly while speaking fluent advanced Chapelish I had never heard before. It felt like sitting inside a room where everyone else shared a secret reality I could not access. After class, one watched groups of students writing the advanced symbols casually on notebooks and lockers. They spoke to each other with this strange intensity, almost like they were hearing layers of meaning hidden beneath the words themselves. I realized then that the school was dividing into two groups. Those who embraced Chapelish completely and those left behind. At home, my headaches started getting worse. I woke up one Tuesday morning feeling like nails had been driven behind my eyes all night. The advanced symbols lingered in my vision even after I closed them. I sat in bed flipping through the notebook where I had documented everything since the first day. Photos, recordings, names of the 17 schools, copies of emails, evidence everywhere, but no actual explanation. That morning, my mom finally started taking me seriously. Instead of dismissing my concerns, she asked practical questions. Had the school board officially approved the curriculum? Were there records of the decision? Did parents vote on anything? She suggested maybe the issue was not the language itself but how suddenly it had been implemented. That advice changed my approach completely. Instead of just sounding paranoid, I started investigating procedure. During free period, I researched public information laws and district policies. I learned how curriculum changes were supposed to be documented. I downloaded request forms and copied legal terminology into my notebook. It felt ridiculous because I was 16 years old trying to navigate systems built for adults. but it also felt like the first real step I had taken. Meanwhile, school life kept getting stranger. Lunch felt unbearable because my entire friend group now spoke Chapelish naturally without noticing. They would start in English, drift into Chapelish mid-sentence, then switch back only when they realized I looked confused. Nobody excluded me intentionally, which somehow hurt worse. The language had simply become more natural to them than English. I felt like a foreign exchange student in my own school. I started tracking my symptoms carefully: headaches, eye strain, mental fog, moments where thoughts arrived in Chapelish before English. I wrote everything down with dates and times. The symptoms intensified after advanced lessons, especially when exposed to the newer symbols. Other students claimed Chapelish made thinking easier and clearer. I seemed to be the only person reacting negatively. The university professors finally answered my emails later that week. One suggested Chapelish might be an experimental, constructed language similar to Esperanto. Another admitted the grammar patterns were unlike anything she recognized academically. Neither had any explanation for why multiple schools across the country were teaching it simultaneously. Their uncertainty scared me more than if they had dismissed me entirely. By Friday, I went to the nurse complaining about persistent headaches linked specifically to advanced Chapelish lessons. She performed standard vision tests and asked routine questions about hydration and sleep. The entire time I tried explaining the connection to the symbols, but she treated it like stress from overstudying. Drink more water, sleep 8 hours. Typical advice. I left furious because nobody wanted to acknowledge the obvious timing. That weekend I entered the school building alone. My mom worked in the district office and arranged access through a security guard because I claimed I needed books from my locker. Instead, I spent 2 hours photographing every piece of Chapelish material in the building. Vocabulary posters lined the hallways. The library contained shelves dedicated entirely to Chapelish readers and reference books that had not existed a month earlier. The Student Center hosted language practice circles during lunch. It had spread everywhere. The gym displayed Chapelish sports terminology. Cafeteria menus included Chapelish translations. Even motivational banners near the auditorium featured slogans written partially in the language. The school was no longer teaching Chapelish. The school was becoming Chapelish. Monday morning, the principal hosted an assembly about innovative educational initiatives. I arrived early, determined to ask questions publicly where he could not avoid them. When the microphone finally reached me, I asked exactly where Chapelish came from and who authorized its implementation across multiple states simultaneously. The room became completely silent. The principal smiled the way politicians smile before avoiding questions. He launched into polished talking points about future-ready education and global communication skills. He talked for nearly 3 minutes without actually explaining anything. When I interrupted to ask again who specifically created Chapelish, he repeated the phrase innovative pilot program like it was programmed into him. People started looking uncomfortable, not because of his answers but because I kept pressing him. Afterward, Mason texted me asking why I was trying so hard to ruin something everyone enjoyed. That message hit harder than I expected. We met at our usual coffee shop later that afternoon, but the entire conversation felt broken. He kept checking Chapelish study group messages while I talked. Every few minutes his phone buzzed with notifications written entirely in advanced symbols. I asked him honestly if any of this frightened him. He stared at me like I was the crazy one and said Chapelish made him feel more focused than anything else in his life. He claimed thoughts connected faster when he used it, like the language removed unnecessary confusion from the brain. Then he told me maybe I would understand if I stopped fighting it so hard. We left without making plans to meet again. The PTA meeting that week was even worse. Administrators presented Chapelish as a revolutionary educational breakthrough. Parents asked about grading systems and college applications while nobody questioned the fundamental insanity of teaching a language with no known origin. The school claimed universities were already recognizing Chapelish proficiency, which made absolutely no sense because the language existed nowhere except those 17 schools. I watched adults nod along calmly, while my entire body screamed that something was wrong. Then I noticed another disturbing detail during class assessments. The tests were not measuring creativity or communication the way real language courses do. Every answer followed rigid predetermined structures. Fill in the blank, choose the correct grammatical pattern, repeat exact sentence constructions. Students were not being encouraged to express original ideas. They were being trained to think within very specific frameworks. That realization terrified me enough to stay after school again and confront the teacher one final time. I asked why she kept telling me to stop resisting instead of answering basic questions. I asked what chapelish was really for. This time she looked genuinely tired, almost sad. She told me human language shapes human thought, which I already know from psychology classes. But then she said something much darker. She said English was inefficient. According to her, natural languages create confusion, conflict, emotional instability, and misunderstanding because they evolved chaotically over centuries. Chapelish was different. It had been designed intentionally, optimized, structured to produce clarity and cooperation. I remember laughing nervously because it sounded insane. Then she said the sentence that made my blood run cold. She said the first generation always resists restructuring. I asked who designed it. For the first time since this nightmare began, her calm expression slipped slightly. She looked toward the classroom door before answering quietly that I was asking questions beyond my assigned level. Assigned level, not understanding level. Assigned. That night I could not sleep at all. Around 2 in the morning, I opened my laptop and searched every archived version of our school website. Buried in an older district budget report, I found a reference to an organization funding experimental communication initiatives across multiple educational regions. The name was buried deep in financial records and mentioned only once, the Chapel Foundation. I searched it immediately. Nothing. No website, no public records, no tax filings, no board members. Just one ghost reference hidden inside school funding documents. My chest tightened so hard I thought I might throw up. The language was called Chapelish. The organization was the Chapel Foundation. This had been planned long before students ever heard the name. The next morning, half the school seemed different somehow. Students moved through hallways with this eerie synchronization, conversations flowing smoothly in advanced Chapelish. Groups paused and stared at me when I passed. Not hostile. More like curious, like I was the last person refusing to board a train everyone else already accepted was leaving. Then Mason approached me before second period. He looked exhausted but strangely peaceful at the same time. He told me there was a special advanced session after school and that the teacher wanted me there specifically. I asked why. He hesitated before saying they believed I was finally ready. I should have refused. Instead, curiosity dragged me there. Only 12 students sat inside the classroom after school ended. The windows were covered. The lights remained dim except for candles placed around the room in strange geometric patterns. The teacher stood at the front beside a board filled with advanced symbols that twisted across the surface like living things. She began speaking entirely in advanced Chapelish. At first I understood nothing. Then slowly, horrifyingly, meaning started forming inside my head without translation. Not words exactly. Concepts, emotional structures, entire chains of thought arriving fully formed. I realized Chapelish was never meant to be spoken like normal language. It bypassed translation itself. The teacher explained humanity had reached a point where natural communication systems created too much division, wars, political collapse, social fragmentation. The Chapel Foundation believed civilization needed cognitive alignment through optimized language structures. Chapelish was designed to reshape human thought gradually across generations. That was why it spread through schools first. Children adapt fastest. I stood up immediately and tried to leave, but Mason blocked the door. Not aggressively, calmly, almost compassionately. He told me I was scared because my mind was still fragmented by inefficient thought patterns. He genuinely believed he was helping me. That broke my heart more than anything else. I shouted that they were brainwashing students, but nobody reacted emotionally. They just watched me quietly while the teacher explained resistance symptoms were normal during early restructuring phases. The headaches, the confusion, the emotional instability, all expected. Then she said something I will never forget. She said once fluency reached a certain threshold, reverting completely to older cognitive structures became impossible. In other words, there was no going back. I ran out of that classroom shaking so hard I nearly collapsed in the hallway. I went straight home and showed my parents everything. The recordings, the financial documents, my notes. For the first time, my father stopped dismissing me completely. He finally looked afraid. Mom contacted a lawyer the next morning. Within days, several parents from other districts began raising concerns publicly online. Students leaked recordings from advanced sessions. Journalists started asking questions about the Chapel Foundation. Then suddenly, almost overnight, everything vanished. The Chapelish classes were suspended indefinitely. Teachers disappeared without notice. Websites referencing the program went offline. School administrators claimed the curriculum had been part of an experimental educational partnership that failed to meet standards. Nobody admitted what the program actually was. But the scariest part is this. Even after the classes ended, students still remembered the language. Some continued speaking it privately. Mason transferred schools before graduation, and the last message he ever sent me was written entirely in advanced Chapelish. I could not fully understand it, but part of my brain still recognized the structure instinctively. Years have passed since then, and I still catch myself thinking in Chapelish sometimes, usually late at night, usually when I am tired. Certain ideas still arrive easier in that language than English. Certain emotional concepts feel cleaner and sharper when shaped through its grammar. I hate that part of me adapted despite everything, and every once in a while, I search online again. Most traces are gone now. The 17 schools deny the program ever existed. Archived pages disappeared years ago. Former students rarely talk about it publicly. But last month I found something that made my stomach drop all over again. A short video uploaded from a classroom in another state. New students, new teacher, same symbols on the board. And written beneath the video in perfect advanced Chapelish was a sentence I understood immediately even though I wish I did not. The first generation always resists restructuring.